Today we will talk about the materials that we used in the field, mainly the hives. We will show you the details about the hives, how it's working, and the small material that we need to use in the field. Then follow us. You will see what we will show you. Come. Here we have the most important material for the field, the beehives. Beehives are very important for receiving the swarms, for the beekeeper handling, and it needs to be standard. It needs to have some measures for be easily all handled in the field. This standard is a Langstroth standard that was developed by Lorenzo Lorraine Langstroth in USA in 1851, some years ago. And the most important detail about the Langstroth hive, that is the hive more used around the world in different countries, is two things. First, the movable frames. Second, the bee space. What is a bee space? Bee space is measured that we have inside for the bees walking for all parts inside the nest, inside the hive. And this bee space is around from 7 millimeters until 10 millimeters. If we take a frame and put in this position, the same position of the cover, we will have under the top of the bar the bee space. This is the bee space. This is the most important thing that Langstroth discovered for produce this kind of hive many years ago. If this space is too much, the bees will produce wax combs in this space. If the space is less than 7 millimeters, the bees will fix with propolis and wax, and the bees will not have access to control some pests as ants, as wax moth. That's why it's very important we have this space for the bees circulate for all parts of the hive. If we take two frames and put in this position, that the same position that they stay inside the hive, we have the bee space for the bees coming from one side to another side of the frame. Here is the same thing. If you can come here, I will show you the bee space here between the wall, among the wall and the sidebar of the frame, we have a space, a bee space. This is the big difference of a standard hive, mainly for Langstroth standard. A standard hive, Langstroth standard hive, has some different components. Bottom board, the floor, the nest, the hive board, and the cover. The basic three elements. If you see, it was built with a solid, very solid wood with the dimensions around 2 centimeters. It's a very, very heavy material. And the nails used for assembling the material, whereas a screw is not normal nails. As a screw, when and after assemble the material, assembly with the nails, they cover the top of the nails with wax, for the nails do not have any access to the weather conditions and will not oxidize. This is a very interesting detail. The frames of the hive have 4 parts. The down part, the top bar, and 2 sides. We have the material at the same dimension until the half of the side part, and after remove some wood for having the bee space between the frames. The bees can come from one side to another side, and the frames have from 3 until 4 different holes for put the wire. Here in each hole, the 3 holes that we have in each side, we have eyelets. Why eyelets? Because when the wire is crossing between the wood, you will not fix on the wood. They will be free for have the correct tension when you put the wire. And here is not a common wire. This is stainless steel wire. We use it stainless steel instead the galvanized or normal wire, because with the time the galvanized wire or normal wire will be oxidized, and we can't have this kind of material in contact with the wax and with the brood and of course with the honey. These wires are the support for the wax foundation and for the wax comb. This is very important, because if you do not have these wires on the frame, the wax comb will do not have support and they will broken anytime that we will handling. The bottom board has 2 sides, is reversible. If you have a fixed beekeeping without a migration, without transport the hives from one side to another side, we do not need to fix the bottom board on the nest. And we can choose, check, this side is bigger and this other side is smaller. When it is winter season, we can reverse this bottom board and change the position, decreasing the size of the entrance of the hive for not bring cold temperature inside the hive. And the summer and the spring, when we have hotter temperatures and more movement of the bees, we use in this big position for increase the ventilation of the hive. Langstroth standard is a cold beehive. Why? Because the frames are in the longitudinal position at the entrance. If we have the frames in perpendicular position, it will be a hot hive. In the countries, inside the countries that we have snow, ice, low temperatures during the winter, the most of the hives, the position of the frames are perpendicular because it will be very hot and more comfortable for the bees getting the correct temperature inside the hive. But in our case, in our country, we have the Langstroth hive, cold beehive. Here is the nest that is the place that the bees live. Here they produce brood, and in our case, honey also. In this country, we have only 2 different seasons for honey production and short seasons. We do not have chance to use the hive supers. The hive supers is another component from the Langstroth beehive. In this space, the nest, the bees will create the brood, the new bees, and the hive supers, they will produce only honey. But here we are not using yet. Maybe in the future, increasing and improving our handling, our details in the field for having time for using these hive supers. Inside the hive supers, this is a hive supers with which name is 3/4. We have hive supers small, 3/4, and we use another hive board here. And as you can check, we have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 frames in the hive super. Why we use it only 8 frames in the hive supers if on the nest we use it around 10 frames? It's very interesting. If we had 10 frames in this size of hive supers and all 10 frames will be full with honey, we will produce 10 kg of honey. If we remove 1 frame and stay with 9 frames, dividing the space between the 9 frames that remain inside, we decrease it 10% of material, 1 frame less, and we will increase the production in 20%. We will have 12 kg of honey produced if all 9 frames will be full. If we remove the second frame from 10 from the hive super and stay with only 8 as we have here, we reduce it 20% of the material and increase the production in 40%. Then in different countries that we work and that has a beekeeping with a good level of development, we use it only 8 frames in the hive supers. We will need to handle less 2 frames per hive super. We will not need to transport 2 frames more per hive, and we will produce more 40% of honey, 14 kg. This is usual, this is normal. On the nest of a Langstroth beehive, we have 10 frames, mainly in climates that we have a tropical or subtropical temperatures. These 2 frames of this side and these 2 frames of that side, we have honey. We find honey. Almost of time we find honey. Why? Because the temperature here is less than necessary for create brood. We need a temperature around 30 to 40 degrees for create brood, and in this position we have around 28 until 30, and the queen bee do not lay eggs at the space of the extremity of the hives, and we will have brood on the 6 frames on the center of the hive, that the temperature is accordingly for create the brood, for the queen bee lay the eggs, and the new queen bees have the normal development. This is a characteristic very, very special for the Langstroth hive. But in our climate in UAE, mainly we will not find broods in this position. Sometimes when the swarms are very strong, we will find brood in this position because the weather conditions here are different. It's too hot. The temperature of the hive, we need to have a good space internally, mainly on the border, from this side or from this side. When you add all 10 frames, we need to have this space. But for which purpose? For when we start to handling a hive, the bees glue the frames with propolis, and we need to remove this propolis for stay with the frames free. That's why we need this space for putting the frames for the opposite side and start to open each frame for this side and of course next side. After we remove all frames, we can start to check the hives because the frames will be free. If inside the hive we have a material that the 10 frames enter pressing with pressure, we will have problem. That's why we need to have some space for starting to handling. And if we use it, Hive Super is not our case, the United Arab Emirates, because we have only short seasons. But if we use the Hive Supers, we can use it, the queen excluder. This is a screen that we put here for be sure that the queen bee will stay laying eggs only in the nest. And we will put the Hive Super here, that we will be sure that the bees will produce only honey. But is not our case, only for show you. Another tool, another device that we can use it for handling the hives is this material, this device that we put in the extremity of the hive. For when I started to remove the frames, I do not put on the top of other hive or on the ground. I put inside this support. This is very special. We can handling, we can check internally the hive and put on this support. This is very, very important. And here, of course, we have a frame tool. This is the best frame tool that we have around the world. Why? Because the material is pure stainless steel, and at the same time it will be used for open the hive, for remove the cover, for scratch propolis or wax. Then I can use it, the frame tool, for remove the frames without put my hand, and with the other hand I can put smoke. I can handling the smoker on the hive. If I have only a tool without remove the frame, I needed to use the two hands for handling the material, and my two hands will be busy and I can't stay with the smoker in another hand. That's why this is the best frame tool that I know by almost 40 years around the world.